Hi, friends. Welcome to tonight's live chat. It's good to see you back. I see you guys chatting away. Before we jump in, I want to try a new feature. Tell me what you guys think of this feature, okay? I'm going to turn on a small little window here. Let me see if it works. I think it's like a little feature and it says show comments on stage. So I'm going to leave this little place open on the side of the screen. I don't know if you can see that. It's like a dark square kind of a thing. I'm going to see what happens. I want to see what happens. Your comments should come up on the screen as we go along in the live chat. So hopefully it works. Guys, I hope you're having a wonderful Saturday. Just one where you can kind of take it easy and rest up and feel charged up. I was going through the live chat from last night, and you guys were amazing with each other. Like, you had everything so welcoming to each other, and you were educating each other and just really being a great support system. So I'm so glad to see that. I think Fairy Girl, your comment did just come up on the side of the screen. Let me see. There has to be a way that I can enlarge this. No, I'm coming out of here before I do something wrong in the whole thing. Hopefully, I don't know. Can you guys see that? Where your comments, it's you, Ellie Wynn, and Fairy Girl. Let me know if you can see that and it's not just me, okay? But you guys were great in a live chat last night. I'm hoping that we can continue that in tonight's live chat. The psychology, really, it's the psychology of the mind of the abuser. And in a sense, I've done some live chats on this channel in the past, and I've also done some interviews with other podcasts on the psychology of being bonded to the abuser. And I think this is a conversation that a lot of us, we want to discuss. I think we want to understand more about it, but there's not a lot of information, and you guys can tell me better than me, better than I know, because you've probably researched this information at some point. But there's not a lot of information on the psychological process of becoming bonded to the abuser, bonded to that abusive mother, bonded to that emotionally unstable father, bonded to that relationship that you just probably shouldn't be in. What is it that keeps you in general, not you, but you in general, what is it that keeps you bonded to the abuser? And so in previous live chats and videos on this channel and podcasts I've done outside of the channel, I really do highlight that it's more of it's a psychological and emotional process, but it's also a neurological process, meaning that the brain and the psychology of who we are, our emotional needs, it all kind of comes together. And that's what kind of keeps you stuck and bonded to the abuser. Now, in tonight's live chat, I do want to give you some information on the mind of the abuser. Why do they do what they do, right? Why does that abusive parent, abusive sibling, abusive family member, why does that abusive partner in a relationship, why is it that they act out in ways that really removes them far from that nice, loving, caring person that they are the majority of the time? And why can't the abuser just change and get better and do better? And that's the $1 million question in the field of psychology. We don't have that answer. Some research suggests that a lack of emotional intelligence is what kind of contributes to that abuser not being able to change. Emotional intelligence, you guys know what this is. Emotional intelligence is really just being very well plugged in and tuned in to the emotional, what's the word I want to look for? I can't think of the word that I'm trying to reach for. I'm going to say the emotional climate. I'll put it that way. The emotional climate of themselves and other people. Emotional intelligence says that I can navigate my own emotions, but I can also navigate you. I can also keep myself calm while I'm trying to calm you. I can also look at you and engage in what we call perspective taking. And I can really stand off afar if I have to and kind of look at your life story. And I could say, you know what? That kind of hurts. I can kind of feel that. That isn't good. That person's not in a good relationship, or that person's being abused by their mother, their father. You're an adult still being abused by your parent. But I can feel what that means to you. I can feel how that impacts you. So I have the capacity to perspective take and maintain a high level of emotional intelligence. An abuser does not. The mind of an abuser is complex and multi-layered. And the sad part about that is I have, as a clinician, as a therapist, I have sat in many intake sessions, group therapy rooms, or group therapy experiences. I've sat in jail cells. I've sat in juvenile delinquency halls. I've sat in residential treatment facility meetings where the person who is considered the abuser can have some really nice traits that kind of is opposite of who they are when they turn into this really angry, hostile abuser or manipulator or triangulator. It's hard to step into a room, for example, and I encourage you to envision this with me. It's hard to step into a room full of people and scan the room. Sometimes we do that. We tend to do that automatically. And that's emotional intelligence in and of itself. We sometimes walk into crowds, walk into rooms, walk into settings, and we immediately start to scan the room, right? And we're looking for those people who stand out to us, or they may become some kind of a threat to us. Well, I've been in situations where I have scanned the room, and it is really difficult to find where that abusive person is, because they don't look the way that we think they should look. And that's what makes this so tricky. So in my own professional experience, when I've dealt with the mind of an abuser, whether that's an abusive parent, an abusive spouse, an abusive sibling, family member, anytime I've dealt with that, and I look at the person, it's truly difficult to say, okay, that's the abuser over there. That nicely dressed, really clean cut young man is the abuser. That beautiful mom over there that wears a cross around her neck, that carries her Bible everywhere, that seems really grandma-y. That's my new word tonight, guys. um, it's hard to look at that and say, that's an abuser, but it's a reality that is. And that's the sad part. Even people who are engaged in religion, they can be very abusive, right? We're going to talk about that a little bit later. A lot of you have been bringing up cults, religious abuse. I have a ton of videos on my channel about this, so I will post them actually in the description box for you later on, so that you can gain access to those videos without having to search my channel. But sorry guys, that's me, I'm sorry. But there are religious people who can very much so be abusers, and they hide behind a curtain. I just recently did a video on sexual abusers in the religious realms and the spiritual realms, and what they look like and what they don't look like, and why it's so hard to pinpoint them just with your eyes. So I'll post that for you as well. But it's really difficult to look around the room, scan the room, and say, okay, that's an abuser over there, because they look very different, right? We have to keep in mind that abusers really lack two important things: emotional intelligence and empathy. And without those two things, it makes it easier to abuse, right? An abusive mother who has narcissistic tendencies, who really is unhealthy for her adult children, can continue to abuse because she's entitled, she has a need for control, she has low emotional intelligence, and there's absolutely no empathy. And psychology has highlighted that these kind of individuals don't they don't grow over time and change just because they're aging, just because they're experiencing life. They tend to be very stunted in their growth, individuals who are abusive. Part of that is because they've never gotten to a place in their lives where they have worked on themselves, done introspection, right? So looking within, they have never really gotten to a place where they say, you know what? I can be a really bad person. I do A, B, and C, and I need to change, right? Can you imagine a narcissistic mother sitting by herself and reflecting and saying that I have truly hurt my children and I need to change? This is what I've done to Kelly. This is what I've done to Bobby. And it's about time that I take responsibility for that. Can you imagine a narcissistic mother saying that? Not at all. Not at all. What's going to kickstart that narcissistic mother into therapy is probably going to be something personal, like loss of a job, loss of a good reputation, divorce. You know what I mean? Not wanting to look bad, wanting to look good to other people, wanting to keep this positive facade up, being a churchgoer, being religious, being spiritual, and wanting people to admire her for that kind of spirituality and religiosity. So this kind of a mother's not going to just say, you know what, I've done A, B, and C, I need to change. They're going to need something to really kick them into action, and sometimes there is nothing. So that narcissistic mother never changes. She just grows older chronologically. Why does that sound weird, guys? Chronologically? Am I saying that right? Somebody correct me if I'm not saying that right. But she ages, but she doesn't mature, right? A cold-hearted, immature, dominating father may also try to, in some ways, continue the abuse that you've experienced as a child into your adulthood. And that could create just what we talked about yesterday, complex PTSD. So the mind of your father is this, that I hold specific gender roles. So there's a societal and cultural piece to this puzzle. The societal and cultural piece is this, that men tend to be the more assertive. Men tend to be the more disciplinarians, right? In their families. They tend to be the leaders and the moneymakers, right? So if we're looking at specific, long-term, strongly held societal and cultural norms, men tend to be on top all the time, right? And so a dad, let's say this is your father, who has held those common social and cultural norms, those gender roles. Let's say he feels like, I'm going to continue to be the dominating force in your life for as long as you live. I'm going to manipulate things. I'm going to triangulate. I'm going to pit the siblings against each other. I'm going to have an affair in this family and nobody better say anything about it. I'm going to do what I want to do. I'm going to rationalize things. I'm going to justify things. I'm going to minimize things. Nobody better say anything, or there won't be any financial support, emotional support, psychological support, or literal support, right? He's just going to completely withdraw and check out, right? And let's say that pattern of abuse continues over a series of years, or let's say he's done this in a series of events in your life. That is possible, or that is possibly the most traumatizing, I'll put it that way, that is most likely the more traumatizing or stressful piece of your life is having a father who's been abusive from, let's say, birth onward, right? And so that can trigger complex PTSD, right? Because remember, complex PTSD is the relationship PTSD. It's the post-traumatic stress disorder that is not just neurological and physiological, it's also relational. And when that relationship that is the closest relationship to you is not healthy, right? So the parent-child relationship, for example, you are likely to experience complex PTSD. I'm going to say chronic PTSD, but complex PTSD. Excuse me. Let me also add to this before I go to the chat box. I see you guys chatting up over there. I want to get to you, but let me say There's one thing that we don't talk much about, and I hate that because I feel like we need to talk more about what the difference is between a boundary crossing and a boundary violation. A boundary violation is a boundary that is completely crossed. There is no thought behind it. It tends to be very impulsive. It tends to be emotion based. It tends to be the result of anger. It tends to be the result of anxiety and wanting to move forward with something. It is not a very well thought out series of steps when something is a boundary violation. Now, there's something known as a boundary crossing as well, where, the individual, let's say this is your narcissistic mother, she's always been abusive, and she now wants to try to be the mother to her grandson or mother to her grandchild. And you're asking her to please don't do that. I need you to allow me to be the parent, right? A boundary crossing from that kind of mom with narcissistic tendencies would be, let's say, for example, your mom just shows up out of the blue one Saturday morning, brings breakfast, doesn't even announce that she wants to come to your home, doesn't give you time to maybe get dressed and wake up and kind of look somewhat presentable. Maybe mom, just doesn't communicate very well. So she goes and she grabs donuts and bagels and eggs and whatever else from Dunkin' Donuts, and she's got everything in her trunk, and she shows up at 6 a.m. in the morning believing that you're probably awake with your children when you're not. And she knocks on the door, you don't answer. She rings the doorbell a couple times. You look out the window, there's mom's car. You don't know why mom is there. You go to the door and say, "Come on in, mom, why are you here?" And mom says, I just thought I would spend the day with you guys. I know it's 6 o'clock a.m., but I wanted to do something for you guys. I've missed you so much, and I'm so glad that you've moved here. And so I just want to celebrate this Saturday with you. Tell me, guys, how would you be with that? I don't know. I love, love, love my mom. So, I would be like, "Come on in, mom. It's a little early. Can we not do this again? But come on in." If it were my oldest brother, however, my oldest brother would probably be like, "Mom, no, you can't be doing this. My wife is asleep." That's my oldest brother. That's exactly what he would do. He would say, "Come back later, mom." So I guess it depends on the personality, right, in the relationship. But this is a boundary crossing, right? There's no boundary that is holding her back from doing what she wants to do. She comes way too early in the morning. She picks up food without asking anybody what it is that they may want. She just kind of guesses and assumes, right? And then, you're forced to let her in because you don't want to be this rude daughter, right, who doesn't let their mother through the door, a rude son that doesn't let their mother through the door. But everybody in your house is asleep. Your husband has to get up for work at 4 a.m., so you're kind of tired and don't want to be up, or your wife has to get up early. Whatever the case, it's a boundary crossing, right? It hasn't really violated anything, but it's a crossing. And that crossing can happen multiple times. It can happen across a series of events and in many different situations. And if it continues over a certain period of time, those boundary crossings can add up to become emotionally abusive, psychologically abusive. It can also be emotionally and psychologically destabilizing, right? Because you constantly have to set the boundary and reestablish the boundary and set the boundary again and reestablish the boundary. And that is really tiring, right? Now, if we're talking about a boundary violation, we're talking about something has completely been violated, right? The boundary is absolutely not there at all. It's not like mom, in the same example, it's not like mom realizes that you've done something terribly wrong. So an example of this could be an example of a boundary violation would be, let's say your son is going to school and grandma lives right near the school. Well, what does your mom do? She goes to the school, sits outside, picks up your son from school early, tells the school, "I'm grandma, my name is on the emergency contact list, and I think that I want to take him out for lunch, so I'm going to sign him out of school," right? And because she's an emergency contact, They let her sign your son out of school. And they go and have a full afternoon eating pizza, playing video games, running around outside, going shopping. The list goes on. Complete boundary violation, right? So boundary violations, boundary crossings can be abusive over time, and it can really lead to a breakdown in communication. Now, let me also say briefly before I go to the chat box that there's kind of this what do I want to call it? It's kind of like this existential definition of empathy. And because abusers lack empathy, this is important to know. So existentialism says this. It says that empathy is really a process. It's a psychological and emotional process. Abusers don't have it. Period. They don't have it. And that's how come sometimes they can blow up and really throw the house in chaos or your relationship off track, and then they can calm down. They tend to go through idealization and devaluation, right? And so this is because of a lack of empathy. Idolization, you're everything, you're wonderful, I love you, you're beautiful, you're wonderful, you're great, you're smart, right? Okay, idolization. But then guess what? Later down the road, or maybe sometimes for some people hours later, there's this devaluation. You're not what I thought. I really don't like you. I can't wait to get away from you. You're so annoying. I don't like you, right? And so they go through kind of like this, they kind of swing between the two: idolization, devaluation, idolization, devaluation. And that's why they're abusive, right? They never stay the course. There's never one course. It's okay if you get upset. It's okay if you disagree. It's okay if you have mistakes that's been made in the relationship between the two of you, right? Mother and daughters have issues, mother and sons, father and sons, romantic partners, family members, right? It's okay to go through a little bit of a roller coaster in a relationship, right? Humans can sometimes be really complicated, or they tend to be very complicated. But what I mean by this, swinging from idolization to devaluation, is that they tend to have this overly high expectation of you. They tend to be very unrealistic when it comes to who you are as a person. I have a lot of parents that see me for therapy who are dealing with this. Their expectations for their kids are way too high. And because of that, they become abusive in trying to kind of mold that child or push that child in a direction that they want them to go in. But really what is the issue here, I think, for a lot of people in psychology is still kind of teasing this apart. The issue is a lack of empathy and an inability to have cognitive empathy. Cognitive empathy, we talk about this all the time, guys, on the channel, right? Cognitive empathy is, I don't necessarily feel empathy. I don't feel sorry for you. I'm not having this intersubjective experience, meaning I can't perspective take. I'm not having this internal experience that I know what it is that you're dealing with. But I also struggle with the fact that I can't even process logically and intellectually what things must be like for you. So an abuser lacks that emotional or affective empathy, which is that intersubjective experience. It's that internal, I can kind of perspective take. I can kind of feel what you're telling me. I can kind of put myself in your shoes, right? So they don't have effective empathy, and they also don't have cognitive empathy, the ability to kind of rationalize and really process intellectually and psychologically what something must be like for you. So, you throw all this chaos that I just mentioned into the mix of a complex, toxic dynamic of a family, of a relationship. It can be really difficult. Let me mention one last thing, guys, before I go to the chat box. One last thing I want to mention about these abusers is they tend to be very much inflated. So they have an inflated sense of self. And that inflated sense of self tends to be shown through hostility and anger. So I'm going to show you how this goes right now. What did I do with my notebook? I swear I can never keep. Guys, I think I have ADHD. I really do. Let me button this up. I feel like this is going to be a total nightmare if I don't button this up. Okay, let me walk you through this. Okay, there better be some paper in here. Yes. Okay. Now I'm gonna write this out for you. I didn't come up with this idea, but it's an idea that I use for all of my family therapy appointments, and it's a really good way for me to make a point of what happens in the mind of an abuser. So, all right, how can I map this out for you? I am going to, okay. So when I'm in family sessions, and sometimes kids, they're like, Miss Tamara, I don't understand why my dad blows up. He blows up over the craziest things. I don't know why he's doing this. So I usually draw an iceberg. Okay. Don't laugh at my iceberg, guys. It's not going to be good. Oh man, this is bad. Okay. This is bad. Okay. So here's how I do this. Okay. You guys better not laugh at my iceberg. Okay. So there we have it. Okay. That is my imaginary iceberg. It looks fantastic, doesn't it? At the top, guys, kindness. At the bottom, abuse. So if you think of an iceberg, right? An iceberg that sits on top of the water, right? It almost looks like a water line. At the top of the iceberg, I often put the word kindness. And I'll ask the family, what is it that dad does that everybody can see that's wonderful? So here's what they'll do. They'll say he is polite, selfless, meek, smart, handsome. This is really, I'm taking this from a session that I did. Handsome, smart, polite, selfless, meek. I'm trying to think of the other thing that they said. Funny, and giving. That was the other thing they said. Okay. So there we go. There's all the things at the top of the iceberg that the family I had said the dad has. Okay. They said kindness is his core and everything else around kindness is who he is. Okay. And that's basically what we all see. When I look at their dad, I do see polite. I do see selflessness. I do see meek, right? Meekness. I do see a clean cut gentleman. I do see that he's funny because I've laughed in sessions with him while he's joking with his family. So that's what we all see, right? But abuse. Now, under that iceberg is usually that water, right? And sometimes you can't see what's under the water. So I often have the family throw out some things that's abusive. So abuse is under the waterline, okay? And so the family says this to me. He's mean, hateful, discriminatory, arrogant, angry, resentful. They gave me a lot of stuff. Okay. Hostile. Right? So here we go. See that? Fingers are in the way. Sorry, guys. Right? So underneath the surface, they're experiencing abuse. And there's all the different things that they're experiencing. Isn't that an interesting kind of theory? This is the mind of the abuser. They can sometimes come off kind, polite, meek, right? Underneath the surface, though, when the doors are shut, when the windows are down, closed, right? They're totally different. And so most abusers tend to be carriers of hostility and anger. Hostility and anger. And it's sometimes a seething anger underneath the surface, underneath that iceberg, underneath that waterline. It's a lot of ugliness underneath. And it's going to take a while to help that person move through that. Can they? Research in psychology says they can. Will they? Well, it just depends on where they are, right? So I hope that makes sense. And tonight's live chat, guys, that was a really long introduction, right? In tonight's live chat, I'm just going to go over common issues, common behaviors of the mind of the abuser, what comes out of these abusers. I'm going to tell you that. And I also want to give you some insight on how to identify key components of a person's character that says that they might be abusive, right? And some pieces of the puzzle that may help you conclude that yes, I have been in a situation where there is abuse. So let me go to the chat box, guys, and see what you guys are saying. I'm gonna highlight this one briefly because it makes sense. The good glow says they are easily angered. Yes, they are. They're often easily triggered because they tend to, again, have that seething anger under the surface. They tend to be very hostile, and they tend to have a problem, not just with the world, right? So not an external problem. They tend to have an internal problem as well. Now, let me go to Rochella, the good glow. Hello and welcome to tonight's live chat. Glad to see you again. Rochella, hello and welcome. Glad to see you. I wanted to stop at you for a second because you ask a very good question. You say, my question is, what are they so angry about? Sometimes they have been victims of abuse themselves. Sometimes they have experienced trauma in a variety of situations. Sometimes it is simply their brain. It is simply their brain. Abusive people are not just behaviorally compromised. They are not just I'm repeating it so you guys can like cement this to your memory. They are not just behaviorally compromised. They are also neurologically compromised, and they have a really hard time with really important parts of the brain. One being the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex, is right behind the forehead. And really what goes on there, you guys know, is executive functioning, being able to rationalize, being able to control impulsivity, being able to make really good decisions. The prefrontal cortex is compromised in individuals who are abusive. And that is why they sometimes are very impulsive. That is why sometimes they make terrible decisions. That is why sometimes they can't organize anything in their lives, right? Because their prefrontal cortex is compromised. Another piece of the puzzle is they tend to have, I don't know how to, I'll put it this way. It's a multi-layered neuronal system or network. And that sounds big, but it's really not, guys. A multi-layered neuronal network. Really what that is it's a whole piece of the brain where the brain is connected to emotions, thoughts, behaviors, interpretation of reality, impulse control, attention span. It's pieces of the brain that controls all of those things that's compromised in individuals who are abusive. Research in psychology on the neurological pieces to this puzzle highlights that the amygdala tends to be overactive. So you guys know the amygdala. I talk about it all the time. The amygdala is that almond-sized structure in the middle of the brain, and it really is our flashlight. You know, it's constantly scanning the room for threats. It's scanning relationships. It's scanning intentions. And it's a very primitive part of the brain. So there's no logic there. It's really emotional memories. It's cementing of those emotional memories that had some kind of impact on you. You know, growing up in a household where grandma popped popcorn every Tuesday and shared it with you is going to be a memory that's seared into the amygdala. Why? Because there's sights, smells, there's sensory experiences, and the amygdala grabs that and cements it, right? The same thing can happen with abusers. They can have trauma. They could have an abusive family member, an abusive parent, and anything abusive or traumatic that has happened to them, it has been cemented to the amygdala. And so sometimes there's overactivity in the amygdala. And when that happens in the mind of an abuser, they become aggressive. They become angry. They become hostile, right? And also too, I can't forget this, Rochella, cortisol levels. Cortisol levels are stress hormones, right? Cortisol. And so when they are high in the body, what happens? Fight or flight gets kicked off. And so now you're trying to figure out, am I going to run and hide, or am I going to fight this lion that's before me? And a lot of times abusers, they see red, their amygdala is overactive. Their prefrontal cortex is compromised. They don't have the ability to pause and control impulses or think clearly or make better decisions, right? Or choices. And the amygdala is bringing back all of these memories that may be negative, or it's causing that aggression, and throw in their cortisol that's high. You're going to get an abuser who's going to lash out, get angry, grab someone, say something inappropriately, or just do something very abusive, right? So this is a whole system, guys. We're not just talking about, Rochella, that was a great question. We're not just talking about, what are you so mad about? I used to think the same thing until I had the opportunity over the past 16 years of my career to watch this up close and personal in a variety of settings. It's scary, right? It's not always choice. We think you can make a better choice than to abuse. That is true. I agree. However, those who have a compromised series of parts of the brain, it's going to be a little bit more difficult for them, Okay, Gary Bennett, hello and welcome. Glad to see you in tonight's live chat. Gary Bennett says, the abuser is always thinking of ways to deceive others while they continue to harm you. They are just as much about how to outsmart people and not get caught. It's part of their mindset. Yeah, that's so true. It is part of their mindset. I agree with that. Yeah, they have a whole other way that they see reality, and that can be really scary. I'm looking at the same thing you're looking at, right? Imagine looking at a situation, you and the abuser. You may see it one way, the abuser may see it completely different, because they have a very, I'll say, complex and multi-layered brain. I'm just going to leave it at that. I don't want to get far into neuroscience on you guys tonight, but they really do have a different brain. And sometimes that's what contributes to that constant abuse cycle. Other times, there's other factors, and we're going to get into those in just a little bit. Ellie Wynn, did I say hello to you? Hello and welcome. Good to see you in tonight's live chat. Ellie Wynn says, another rock and deep dive from our beloved Tamara, drum roll, please. Oh, that's so cute. Thank you so much for that. I love that. Thank you. Hopefully this is going to be a helpful topic. It's like anytime I have to have a conversation on abuse, I always feel like my brain is overwhelmed, because there's so many pieces to this puzzle. You're going to see that as we go along. Hanifa El Hameen, I hope I'm saying that correctly. Hello and welcome. Good to see you back tonight. Sylvie, hello and welcome. Glad to see you. Kamisha Green, unapologetically me. Hello and welcome. Good to see you back tonight. Whoa, I did not mean to hit that. I really do need to get that t-shirt. Not today, YouTube. Not today. Something's always happening to me. Annie Walker, hello and welcome. Good to see you in tonight's live chat. Annie Walker says, I've been around many. It's like they turn into a demon. You can literally see their eyes change. Yeah, sometimes you can, right? Oh, man. I did a presentation like that in grad school over 12 or 13 years ago. And I had a series of the world's, what do you call them? Jeez, it's escaping me. I can't think of what you call it. No, it's not America's Most Wanted. I was thinking America's Most Wanted. No, it's people who have engaged in massacres. I can't think of the word that I'm trying to reach for, but it's individuals in our nation that is engaged in committing heinous crimes, right? They have been individuals who have plotted, they've murdered, and they still feel justified, and we can think about the nation's massacres and you can look at the individuals who are behind the gun, the individuals who are behind the crime, and sometimes you can look at their face, their affect is what we call it. So how their face kind of is displayed to the world. You can kind of look at them and see that, okay, that one over there looks a little bit angry and hostile. That one over there looks a little bit, for lack of a clinical term, crazed, or they look like they are not all put together well, or they're not all there. And so sometimes you can look at their facial expressions, you can look in their eyes, and you can see a lot of different things. I truly believe eyes are the window to the soul. And so you can see that in people who are abusive sometimes, you can see that in people who are very hostile and very angry sometimes. Yeah. What did I just hit here? Here we go. I like what you say here, Rochella. You say they have performative personalities. Yeah, I agree with that. I like that. Jermaine, hello and welcome. Good to see you in tonight's live chat. Welcome back. Sun and Sunflowers, welcome back. Good to see you. Brian D. Bernstein, hello and welcome back. Good to see you, my friend. Christine, hello. Good to see you. And I don't remember seeing you, so I'm going to say welcome to the channel. Christine says, emotional intelligence, understand the context. Break that down for me, Christine, because I may be missing something there. Emotional intelligence, understand the context. Break that down for me, Christine. Because it's a disconnect in my mind. It's not you. It's me. Dennis Robinson, hello and welcome. Good to see you in tonight's live chat. M.N. Odell, good to see you. Welcome. M.N. Odell says, I would think trauma bonding would be at its worst when a child comes into the world in a dysfunctional family. You have no normal to return to. Well, very much true. Traumatic bonding, it's interesting because there's no research studies. You ready for this? No research studies on traumatic bonding that can happen in infancy. Traumatic bonding tends to be spoken of more so with relationships where there are two individuals who are either in a position in a relationship, like a parent, a child, a spouse, a family member, or two adults. But there's really a lack of information and research on how traumatic bonding plays out with an infant. What I can say, just knowing a little bit about attachment theory, is when an infant comes into the world, they really are exposed in a way that says any and everything, or anything and everything that they are exposed to could very much create an impact on them, right? That isn't a good one, or is a good one. In abusive families, it tends to be a not so good one. And so from infancy onward, most likely that infant is developing an insecure attachment to the adult that's abusive, or to the family environment that's very abusive. And over time, that insecure attachment can, as that infant grows over time, then we can look at traumatic bonding, especially when that cognitive dissonance starts to hit that child, or hit that young adult, or hit that adult child. We can really see traumatic bonding then, when the child is old enough to just say, now, wait a minute, dad was this way a couple minutes ago, and now he's this way. But I don't want to see that. So I'm just going to see all the good stuff, and I'm going to defend my dad, and I'm going to make sure that I forgive him every time, because I know that's not really who he is. And so the bond just gets tighter and tighter and tighter. That's why I said earlier, it's kind of like being bonded to the abuser, right? You bond and you continue to bond to the abuser, depending on what's happening emotionally, psychologically, and even neurologically. So M.N. Odell, very good point. Glad you brought that up. All right, guys, bear with me as I go through this. I am really, really behind. Fairy Girl, did I say hello to you? Hello, welcome. Always good to see you. Thank you for saying that. I'm going to star your comment. Annie Walker, thank you so much for that. Much better today. The reason why I'm kind of tired right now, and I may seem a little bit sluggish, at least I feel that way, is I felt so much better, guys. And so I went out in the garden and I started like pulling some weeds today. I was talking to the birds. I was cleaning off the patio. I was in that mindset today. And now I'm just like, oh my God, why did I do all of that? So I'm probably I'm due for a nap, something. But thank you, Annie Walker. Much better today. Donna Lee, hello and welcome. Glad to see you back tonight. Donna Lee says, I met a man in 1999, never in a relationship, and he began covert stalking me and still is. I think he has schizophrenia. This is an abuser. God, please help. Well, if he is an abuser, and Donna Lee, if you can have the information to prove, then you can move forward legally, right? But you have to have that concrete proof. That's one of the biggest issues that finds itself at my footstep or footstool when I'm in the office is how do I bring in law enforcement? How do I get help? How do I get the support that I need to deal with people who are abusive in my life? And I often tell them, you have to have concrete proof. It can't be, he's liked a few of my social media posts, he's followed me, on Facebook, and then he's followed me on my Instagram page, and then he's followed me over here. That's not enough, right? Because in today's world, we know that social media is called social media, right? And so law enforcement will look at that as, well, he's being social, right? So, you really do have to have that concrete proof. And if you do have it, you might be able to reach out for help, right? But then for victims, there's often this fear that they're not going to be believed. And that's a whole other live chat, Okay, Fairy Girl, you just said exactly what I just said. Document and report. There you go. The more you report, the better. The more you document, the better. But let me also say this. If you're dealing with a family member who's abusive, right, it's going to be really hard to say, okay, that's my cousin and she's been abusing me. Law enforcement is going to look at you like, are you okay? Right? So it gets trickier depending on the relationship and the dynamic. Also, Fairy Girl, you make a good point. You have to document and report. However, you don't want to document so much information that at the end of all your documentation, it looks like a bunch of nonsense, or it looks like a bunch of junk or information that has no connection. It appears to have a connection, doesn't really have a connection, right? And so that's the other issue. We can talk about all those things in another live chat if you like to. Jermaine says wolves in sheep's clothing. Yeah. Think about religious abuse, right? Or spiritual abuse. You're going to go to church or A, B, and C. You're going to be Catholic or A, B, and C. You're not going to tell about this abuse. You're not going to tell that this is happening to you, because we don't tell outsiders of this church that this was happening. I've been in scenarios with families where that has been said to them. I had a extended family member who kind of gave that impression. I remember going to an event to support them, and they were in a religious, spiritual kind of atmosphere. It wasn't a synagogue, but it was more like a some kind of spiritual or religious atmosphere. And they were trying to get their degree in theology, and they wanted to build this organization and make it something spiritual. But I remember being in this organization, this hall, I'm going to call it like a hall, and my extended family member harassed, if you will, a woman who decided she was not interested in his religious teaching. And she got up to leave, and my family member said, "Oh, where are you going?" And that person said, "Oh, I got to get going. I'm sorry. My daughter here has a play in the morning." And I'm looking at it, and I'm looking at the situation. I'm looking at the little girl, and they look like a decent family. I waved goodbye to them. They were so sweet. And my extended family member goes, I don't think God's going to bless you. God is not going to bless you because you have left early tonight. You must wait until the word of God has ended, until I am done talking, for you to leave this place. And I sat there in shock. Okay. And I thought to myself, I will never come back to this environment ever again. It was just abusive, the way that he kind of showed her up in front of everybody. He was very condescending in how he spoke it. He spoke it over microphone. And she never came back. But sadly, he continued to send her mailings from his organization. He continued to call her every Sunday morning to ask if she was coming to church. He continued to knock on her door like Jehovah's Witnesses do. Like, it was a lot of harassment. So, Jermaine, I guess that's my long response to your statement that sometimes these individuals are wolves in sheep's clothing, and they can be that way in the religious realm. And there you are, you find yourself kind of stuck, like you're standing in quicksand with hypocritical, cold-hearted religious manipulators, and you are nowhere near close to anything positive, and they are truly wolves in sheep's clothing, that's for sure. Janog, hello and welcome. Glad to see you back tonight. Janog says the abuser tries to indoctrinate you into feeling guilt and obligation to give them what they want out of you. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Ara, thank you so much for confirming that. Thank you. Sometimes things sound weird to my ears when I'm exhausted. I think that's most human beings. So thank you for that. And welcome back to tonight's live chat. Glad to have you. Pink Meadows, chronologically. Thank you. Okay. So was that right? Okay. Thank you. And welcome to tonight's chat, Pink Meadows. Good to see you. Tammy Nicely, hello. Glad to see you back, my friend. Hope you're doing well tonight. Tammy Nicely says, yes, Tamara, it's deny. Any abuse happened. It's easy for her to live that way. And doesn't need to take responsibility for action. So it never happened. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And let me also throw this in here. And this may be more specifically for you, Tammy Nicely, that some people, when they hear the word abuse, they're like, oh no, that's not me. That would never happen to me. No, I don't allow abuse to happen. And the reality is that abuse can be insidious. It can be sneaky. It can be one baby step at a time. And the relationship becomes more and more abusive over time. My late grandfather used to give this interesting analogy. He says, do you really think something that wants to harm you is going to come to you looking bad? It's going to come to you looking good first, because then you get a chance to grab onto that thing, right? And it looks good to you until you get pulled in. And then it's like, hello, out of the box, here's the Joker, and I've been hiding here all along. And some people do feel like that. Abuse is complex. It can appear wonderful, the relationship. It can appear like a mother-daughter relationship, a father-son relationship, a father-mother relationship, or a son-mother is what I'm trying to say. It could appear, a co-worker relationship. It could be a romantic relationship, and it looks wonderful. But one baby step at a time as you go through that relationship, if it's not a healthy relationship, it unravels a little bit along the way. And so you find over time that, you looked good at first, but when I continue to go on and I pull the covers off, I realize that you just really get a kick out of harming people, deceiving people, not really being a loving, healthy person, right? So that's one element of that. The other element, Tammy Nicely, I think I was trying to get to earlier, is people think of abuse as being ugly. And they have an abuser kind of, they have this idea seared into their mind that an abuser is unattractive and mean and cold and raging, and they tend to be unkept and maybe a little bit on the ignorant side or the unintellectual side. They may have a mental health condition. They may have a substance abuse problem. And while maybe some of those things may be true, the reality is, again, an abuser doesn't always look like an abuser. So when you say abuse, Tammy Nicely, it may be hard for certain family members to say, yeah, that's what it was, because they're envisioning a particular kind of abuser. Does that make sense? Have you guys ever seen the commercials, for those of you who are over the age of 35? Have you ever seen those commercials that supports abuse, and it supports abuse intervention? Excuse me, let me correct that. And the father is holding the hand of his little girl. Have you guys seen this? He walks by a random woman to get on an elevator. Tell me if you guys have seen this commercial. And while the elevator door is slowly closing, the baby waves to the woman, and right on dad's jacket, the word abuser, and the elevator closes. And I always thought that was a fantastic commercial, because what it's showing us is an abuser can look like a very loving father. And really what you need is binoculars to see through that facade, right? So yeah, Tammy Nicely, take that for what it's worth. Miss Janine MacArthur, hello and welcome. Good to see you back tonight. Miss Janine says, the most religious folks I know are abusive. I've learned to endure and tolerate their communal narcissistic personalities by using my empathy and positive, generous attitude. Yeah, sometimes you have to, right? I think that's wisdom. I certainly think that's wisdom. That's awesome. A seat at the King's table with Tanisha. Hello and welcome back. Good to see you. Stark Sweetheart. Hello and welcome. Hugs back to you. It's good to see you. Stark Sweetheart says, I hold space for those who know how terrifying it is to have parents who are emotionally unavailable and more. Yeah, absolutely. That's elegant. Thank you for saying that. Thank you. Inner Horizon Led. Hello and welcome. Good to see you back tonight. Yeah. Yeah, I love that comment. Yeah. Thank you for saying that. Dre Williams, hello. I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means. You got to break this down for me. I'm not good at catching on things. Good to see you, Dre Williams. Welcome back tonight. All right, guys, give me 1 or 2 more minutes to get some people in here. Then we're going to get back into the content. CBs, hello and welcome. Good to see you back tonight. Citizen Kang, haven't seen you in a while. Hello. Good to see you. Kev Dower, always good to see you. Welcome back. Yes, you're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome. Boundary violations, boundary crossings. It tends to be more of a subject, just so you guys know, in the realm of professional psychology. It tends to be something that's discussed in an ethics class, a social or cultural class. And sometimes it is in our ethics code as professionals, what the difference is between a boundary crossing and a boundary violation. But I really and honestly think it can go far beyond the professional field, right? Dragon Man Sasson, good to see you, my friend. Hello. Be Lit, hello and welcome. Good to see you. Be Lit says, an ex did this to me, showed up at my house uninvited and unannounced, and walked right in as if the door was open, just left the porch, and tried proposing to me to have his 4th child. I don't have kids. Wait, and tried proposing me to his 4th child? I don't have kids. Oh, God. Oh, geez. I froze dumbfounded from the shock of him appearing at my house and trying to incite a relationship. Oh, my goodness. First of all, please don't come to my home. Don't do that. Don't do that. How do you, I don't feel anything for you in here when you have totally disregarded my boundary, which is my personal space of something called my home, where no strangers are. You know what I mean? The striking of a relationship can happen when there's safety, right? You don't feel safe when somebody's come to your doorstep, right? I'm sorry, B-Lit. That was awful. Okay, guys, let's jump into common issues. Give me 1 second. Excuse me. Okay, common issues with abusers. This is backed by research, and I see this as well all the time. Common issues is reduced inhibitions. Abusers have reduced inhibitions. How can that happen? ADHD, untreated ADHD or poorly treated ADHD, right? Impulsivity, low attention span, poor concentration, parts of the brain that is impacted by ADHD makes it really hard for abusers to stay the track, to stay the course, to do what they're supposed to do, right? Sometimes they go off track because they're impulsive and they're inattentive, and they don't tend to learn from their mistakes. That's the scary part, right? And so reduced inhibitions can include ADHD. We might as well also include drug abuse in there, right? Sometimes, most people think that, maybe I shouldn't say most, but some people think that if they get high, drink some alcohol, smoke some marijuana, that it's just going to give them a little buzz, or it's going to make them more insightful, or it's going to make them less on edge. But the reality is this, that marijuana, Percocets, over-the-counter drugs, right? Narcotics, Percocets, over-the-counter medication sometimes that's taken way too much, and alcohol, it all lowers your inhibitions, right? And alcohol and marijuana tend to do that more so depending on how much you take in. Lowered or reduced inhibitions can often lead to abusive behavior. That is why people who are really, really, really addicted to marijuana and really has a hard time recognizing that they are very addicted to the substance. Most people think, I can just stop. Not really for everybody. So that is why people who are addicted to marijuana, people who are alcoholics, sometimes they drink or they smoke, right? And they go home and the whole explosion happens there. Why? Because they have reduced inhibitions. Their impulsivity is at an all-time high at this point, right? They think they are sounding and appearing intelligent and well with it, and they are not, right? Just watch a police officer trying to do a sobriety test on a person who thinks that they are talking right, behaving right, answering the police questions right. And sometimes they're doing that sobriety test and they're going this way and that way trying to stand up, and and the officer is most likely looking and thinking this person is under the influence, something terrible. But the person who's under the influence thinks that they're doing just fine. And if you watch some of the body cam videos that are on YouTube, sometimes the person who is clearly drunk will say, did I do it right? I'm sorry, it's my shoes. I can't stand right. Oh, I'm sorry, I have a leg problem. I can't stand right. Oh, it's so cold out here. I can't stand right. Right? No, you're drunk. So, you're intoxicated. So reduced inhibitions, substance abuse has to go under there, right? And when there's reduced inhibitions, there is oftentimes abuse towards other people. Financial abuse and economic abuse is something that we have to consider, right? With these people, financial and economic abuse could happen. You're an adult child and you're trying to have a relationship with your parent, but at the same time, you need a loan to buy your first car, to buy your first home, or to pay your mortgage, to pay some bills, to get ahead on credit cards, whatever the case may be. Your parent may lend you that money, maybe your spouse, maybe your family member, an extended family member, and they're going to harass you to get it back, right? Knowing that every week you're contributing to paying them back. It's just really hard. You're not getting enough hours, or you lost your job, or your health is bad. Whatever the case may be, financial and economic abuse is, I'm going to hold the fact that I've given you this money over your head, and I'm going to see to it that you give me my money back. And I'm going to see to it that you understand that I've given you this money, and so you owe me. Sometimes it's also, you have given me the control of paying your bills, paying your mortgage, whatever. And so because of that, I'm going to spend some of your money without your awareness. That is also financial and economic abuse. And an abusive husband or an abusive wife holding the credit cards or holding their paychecks only for themselves and not telling you what's in there, or not giving you your money back, right? So financial and economic abuse. The other thing is something that we call assertive control. It's really this need for dominance. I have to be on top. Abusers have to be on top, right, guys? They can't be equal or beneath. They have to be up here. And most of that is because of their low self-esteem, their impulsivity, their poor decisions, and their lack of emotional intelligence. Past experiences. That's another common issue with abusers. They tend to reenact their trauma. So something abusive happened to them in their childhood. They're going to go ahead and reenact that same thing into their adult relationship with you. And so what happened to them as a child is now becoming a situation and a thing with you. And that is the unhealthy part of that puzzle. They may also have this sense of powerlessness on the inside. And when they kind of, explode like a lion does, or they attack like a wild animal, in a sense, it gives them this sense of power, right? You've got to think of endorphins. Those are kicked off when a person gets really angry. An abuser, they already have high levels of cortisol, so they're in a stress state. So they're in fight or flight on top of endorphins, right? And sometimes their hostility and anger mixed with substance abuse can all be a whole big volcano full of chaos, right? And sometimes all of those things gives them internal power and they feel like they are invincible. We also have to add in here distorted thinking. An abuser thinks in a very skewed and twisted way. You'd be surprised as to how they think about the next person, how they think about boundaries, how they think about relationships. It's a skewed mentality. They often tend to rationalize and justify. And it's almost like a game of ping pong, They hit one way with rationalization, they hit another way with justification. And it's like this back and forth, rationalization, justification, rationalization, and it just goes on and on. And so sometimes you can't even get that abuser to say, yes, I did A, B, and C. I need help, and I'm sorry I've done this to you. They're not gonna say that. Why? Because they're in a ping pong game of rationalizing and justifying. Rationalizing and justifying. That's how they get over on most people, and that's how they can drop to their knees, cry, and say, "Please forgive me," and 5 minutes later go back to doing something abusive. Right? There's also a sense of you owe me. You owe me. Some parents are like this, particularly narcissistic parents. They tend to have the attitude that you owe me. I once had a mom, just a short story. I once had a mom that came to therapy. She brought her daughter and her son. She tended to be a yeller. Everything those kids did to her, she would yell at. She would stomp and she would scream and she would just have a whole big adult meltdown. And I was shown one of the videos from the son. And I remember looking at this video in pure embarrassment because mom had absolutely no self-control. She was just like this huge volcano over her children. She waited a few years. They did therapy with me. Her son turned 18, her daughter turned 20, and they were in a family session with me. Mom had been in treatment, support groups, medication, any kind of help she could get, she was using it. And she sat down and she looked at her two children and she says to them, even though the reverse should have happened, she looks at them and she says, "You guys owe me. You guys owe me." And, sometimes when I'm in therapy sessions, I take notes most of the time. I'm on my computer, I'm looking at the family, I'm taking notes, I'm kind of throwing questions out there, or I'm navigating the scene of the room, right? And I'm trying to educate, or I'm trying to provide a safe place. So I'm on my computer, I'm taking notes, and I literally stopped typing. And I literally could have passed out when she said that, because she put them through legal trouble. She was always drunk and driving drunk. She lost her license. Well, was suspended a few times. Then she lost it. They helped her get her license back. Interestingly, she was able to pass her driving exam. Her son would take care of the family like he was the father. The daughter was going to school and getting her education so she can have a good job to buy the things that they all needed. I mean, mom really laid on her children, but she felt really arrogant this session. And so she had the attitude of, "You owe me." And she says to them, "You guys owe me. The years that I didn't get when I had to raise you. You guys were hard to raise, And she just kept saying it. "You guys owe me." So an abuser sometimes will have the disposition, or they may verbalize, you owe me, you know? It's a very ugly thing. Let me also throw in here the dark triad traits. A lot of people say, is there really a such thing as the dark triad? I think there is. Narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. You have those three things that are shown up in an abuser. And an abuser who has a lack of empathy, they tend to idolize you and then devalue you. They rationalize and they justify their behavior, right? If you have somebody like that, it's possible that they also have a sadistic side of themselves. They have this Machiavellian kind of mentality. It's also possible that they are callous and cold, like psychopaths, and so they can have that. And then they also tend to be rather self-centered, which is how come they can explode in rage, hostility, and anger, right? And that entitlement is narcissistic. So you're probably going to see the dark triad traits. The other thing is, and I want to say this is the last thing before I go back to the chat box, then I'm going to give you the final piece of this and we can wrap up. But let me also throw in here, they often tend to have imbalanced expectations, and a lot of them tend to be the product of domestic violence, Those are two tragedies, right? Imbalanced expectations of the relationship, of the family dynamic, of the world, that can lead to abusive behavior, right? Because the minute something doesn't meet their expectations, they're ready to fly off the handle. And being the product of domestic violence kind of sensitizes, or what's the word I'm looking for? I'm going to use sensitize. I'm just going to stick with that word. It kind of sensitizes you to abuse. And so you don't feel as triggered by things as maybe you would if you didn't grow up in a house that had domestic violence. It's like, how many times do you need to hear something over and over before it becomes a common experience? So a lot of abusers have grown up in households with domestic violence, and it has really made them very insensitive to abusive patterns of behavior. All right, guys, let me go back to the chat box. I need a little bit of a break. I feel like I'm falling asleep, to be very honest. It's been a long day. And then we can go ahead and wrap up. I'm actually going to tell you what to look for in an abusive person, and then we're going to go ahead and wrap up. Jermaine says, my mom helped my sister file taxes claiming my son as a dependent. I only randomly found out later, and then I wasn't able to get the bonus child tax credit the government provided that year. Jermaine, that is awful. Let me say this, that is tax fraud. So here's what happens. You can either go to the IRS and say, look, my sister claimed my son on her taxes, but these conditions have not been met where she can claim him. Now, the IRS will then, trigger an investigation, and they will figure out what her tax return was and all of that stuff. Okay. So you could go that route. You could do that with state, federal, and local. Or what you can do is kind of pause for a second and think, did my sister have the right to claim my son in some capacity? Has she bought him clothes throughout the year? Has she taken him to daycare and paid his daycare bills? Has she fed him several times during the week, right? Or during the day while I worked, for example? Did she buy him a new bed and make sure he had nice clothes, right? Did he contribute to the household in some way? Did she have to raise him for a certain period of time, right? Does she babysit him a lot? And so she uses her resources to babysit, right? So you want to go through that process in your mind and kind of write down all the things that she's done. And if she deserves that tax credit, so be it, right? So there may be some research you want to do into that. You know what I mean? But yeah, that's a little bit of a tough one. It can be very, very frustrating indeed. You just have to make sure that the claiming, right? The claiming part of that tax profile is legitimate and legal. Otherwise, tax fraud. Just Jean, hello and welcome. Glad to see you and welcome to the channel. Just Jean says, wow, that's my mom. Oof. Says literally screams, I hate you. That's awful. I'm sorry. That is awful. Anytime a parent screams, "I hate you," they've missed a couple of steps in the maturity department. I'll put it that way. CB says, one of my boundaries was no horror games with my kids. Yeah, good for you. Then I find out they were trying to get my kids to play their video games of horror. They were little too. Oh my. Kids are something. They will outsmart you. Okay, ask a child and family therapist. Okay, they outsmart me all the time. You know, some of the kids that come and see me for therapy, I have a whole like literally closet top to bottom of games of, you know, regular kid games, therapy games. And sometimes I'll open the door and I'll let the kids look at the games, you know, or open the drawer and let them look through to find the games. And they'll pull out Uno, and sometimes we'll play Uno, you know, and I feel myself getting competitive. I'm like, look here, you're not going to keep beating me in Uno because this is getting a little bit old. And sometimes, you know, the kid is just so smart and they know how to run like loops around you, you know, and, you know, depending on the kind of like disposition of a child or the personality, sometimes they can flip the script. They act like a therapist. You know, one time a kid came in, just to kind of give you a laugh, CBs. One time a kid came in to see me for therapy. He's been seeing me for, I don't know, 10 years, maybe a little less. And he says to me one day, Miss Tamara, you look really tired. I said, I am exhausted. I'm tired. I'm sorry, babe. I have been taking care of my grandmother. This was back in 2020 when COVID happened. I said, I've been taking care of my grandmother around the clock and I just want a nap. I'm sorry. He's like, Miss Tamara, do you want to talk about it? I says, well, I don't want to take up your session talking about my problems. And he says, well, it's kind of therapy. It's therapeutic that you talk to me about your problems because then I can feel confident and my self-esteem will increase. And I'm just sitting there and I'm like, this child can't be 10 years old. So CBs, okay, kids will run loops. You guys know that. They'll run loops around you. You got to kind of stay on top of things with them. I try. I never make it though. I try. Hanifa El Hameen says, boundaries, like anything else in life, are not acknowledged or respected. They will not, can't acknowledge anything that prevents them from doing what they want to do when they want to. Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, you kind of have to, in a sense, develop this internal constitution. And that's what I've done, where my boundaries are a part of my presentation to the world. That my presentation to the world says that, yes, I am kind. Yes, you may see somebody who's very much a brainiac. Yes, you may see somebody that you know, have a certain view of, but you also see that my boundary stands right here and you know not to cross it. You know what I mean? So you almost have to hold your boundary really tightly in today's world, you know? It's rough, right? B-Lit says they see boundaries as a challenge they must beat. Ooh, yeah. I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah. Uh-oh, sorry, guys. I'm going to put Stark's sweetheart up here. She's awesome. That's so sweet of you. So I want people to see that. Bear with me, guys, as I scroll. CBs says they love the energy of chaos and drama. I think they're afraid of peace, love, and kindness. Some abusers are. Some abusers are. And some abusers have absolutely no idea what love is, what it isn't, what a boundary is, what it isn't, right? You know, what kindness and compassion is. Keep in mind, they lack the neurological capacity sometimes to understand that. You know, so this is a brain issue. It's a brain issue for them most of the time. Hello, DM. Welcome to the track. Glad to see you, and welcome to the channel. I don't remember you, so welcome. DM says, we might become very smart one day because you are constantly making intelligent videos. Thank you. Oh, thank you so much. That's so kind. Learning is forever, right, guys? I'm still learning. I'm still learning every day. And when it comes to kids under the age of 18, I'm really still learning, you know. The Good Glow says a false representation They present themselves to the public one way, but behind closed doors, they are monsters. Yes, they can be. Very, very much true. Okay, let me catch up in this, guys. Give me 1 second as I scroll. Live Life, hello and welcome. Good to see you in tonight's live chat. Live Life says, I love Tamara's illustrations. Mad I'm late, but glad to make it nonetheless. I'm always glad to see you. I very rarely see you on here. And thank you. I always feel like my illustrations are kindergarten. You know what I mean? But sometimes if you're a visual learner like me, you need that. You know what I mean? I'm going to get sophisticated with those illustrations. I promise you. George Young, hello and welcome. Good to see you in tonight's live chat. George Young says the person that you first meet is their representative. Ooh, yeah. My mom used to say that all the time. Yeah. Yeah. My mom used to say that all the time. The first person that you meet is who they are. I can see that. I can see that. I don't know if we should, kind of blanket the entire civilization with that theory, because some people really do show up a certain way at the first meeting, but then they show up very differently at the second meeting. You know what I mean? So yes, I do believe that is the case, George, but at the same time, we really have to apply that on a case by case basis. But I agree. I do. Fairy girl, thank you so much for that. I love you. Thank you for that. Yeah, you're welcome, Rochella. Okay, I'm just trying to catch up. You guys are down at the bottom of the scrolling page here, and I'm still at the top. Ellie Wen says, I see them more as a volcano in rest, but always boiling, hateful anger available at any and all moments. I also see the iceberg, Nart. Nice in the surface, hidden, fragmented, anger bits below. Nicely said, Ellie Wen. I'm going to star that. I love that. I agree. Okay, Tara M. Hello and welcome. Glad to see you in tonight's live chat, and welcome to the channel. Tara M says, I just talked to someone just like that. Exactly. You mean stop talking. Absolutely. Yep. It's hard to have a relationship with them. Ara says they just shouldn't be in relationships. I hope I'm saying that correctly. And I very much agree. And I love the lion in the screen picture. Lions are my favorite. They're very powerful. Jeremy Robinson, hello and welcome. Glad to see you back tonight. I just want to say hello to you. I see you responding to someone. Okay, bear with me. Regina Myers, thank you so much for that. Glad to see you back tonight. Mark Lee, hello and welcome. Good to see you. Mark Lee says, these abusive behaviors could be caused by childhood concussions. Am I correct? Becoming an abusive adult? I don't know. I'm ready to Google this. No, I don't think so. But let me also say though, that depending on the intensity of the concussion and depending on what side of the head that it happened on, you may be able to make a case for that. Imagine kids who just bump their head on something, right? That's their prefrontal cortex. That's the frontal part of their brain, right? And so there may be some residual effects with impulsivity, poor attention span, reduced inhibitions, terrible decision making, right? You may also see some executive control issues there as well, executive functioning issues there. And not to mention bits and pieces of the personality can, become a little bit more wired or wired differently than it was before the concussion, I should say. But think of this, that the brain is really encased. I've said this to you guys before. It is encased in cerebrospinal fluid. And the brain is not connected to anything, it's just floating in the skull in cerebrospinal fluid. And so when a child hits their head, whether that's in football, whether that's abuse, whether that's an accident, the brain jolts right along with the impact, right? And so depending on if it was a side hit, right, the temporal lobes may be affected. If it was a front hit, the prefrontal cortex. If it was behind the head, the occipital lobes, right? So it really depends on the occipital lobes are back here, guys. For those of you who are like, what's that? Behind the head. Yeah, behind the head and below the, I want to say below the, oh God, what do you call it? Below the skull is the occipital lobes. And that has a lot to do just kind of with visual information and really taking in sensory information visually. So, Mark Lee, it just depends on where it is. And I'm not really aware of any research that connects the two. But that was a very good question. It allowed me to kind of illuminate some things for you guys too there. Okay, anaphylaxis, hello and welcome. Good to see you tonight. Welcome back. Okay, bear with me, guys. Deborah Penna, I see you on here. I'm just trying to get to you without shutting down the whole live chat on accident. Deborah Penna, hello and welcome. Good to see you. Haven't seen you in a while. Hello, Raymond Vincent Garcia Jr. How have you been, my friend? Haven't seen you in a while. Good to see you. All right, let me keep scrolling, guys. Okay, bear with me. James McDonald, hello. Glad to see you. I haven't seen you in a while. Yeah. Grounding to nature is just, yeah. Yeah, right? I love being out there. It's peaceful, you know what I mean? Yeah, it kind of connects you to your, it connects me to my roots, you know, and it kind of connects you to the thing that just makes the world go around, which is the natural flow of life, right? Nancy R, good to see you. Glad you're back tonight. Okay. Helene Webster, hello and welcome. Good to see you tonight. Deborah Penna says, I was adopted and was in 5 different homes till I got to my adopted parents at 21 and a half years old. Ooh, that can be rough, right? Yeah, that can be rough. Jeremy, I have a lot of kids. Let me just say before I go to Jeremy Robinson, I have a lot of kids who have been adopted and they're split down the middle for me. I have kids who have been adopted and I love hugging them and I love talking to them and reading stories with them during sessions and playing games with them and sometimes just talking about their identity and how they see themselves and where they want to be in life and how they're fitting into their family, you know. So I have those kids who have been adopted and fostered. But then I also have the other side of the spectrum as well in my practice where there's adopted kids, foster kids who are literally omens. And some people may be like, kids are not omens, you know, but I disagree with that. I think if adults can be omens and evil and have dark sides, I do believe children can as well. It really just depends on their experiences and their trauma and their upbringing, and the list goes on. But I do have that other side where there's kids who have been adopted and fostered, and they are just really, really traumatized and very difficult to deal with, you know? So it's wonderful when you can kind of get into a family and feel safe there and continue in healthy development. You know what I mean? Jeremy Robinson says, voice messages are great forms of evidence. They really are. They really are. I agree. Keep your voice messages. Awesome. Hello and welcome. Good to see you. Thank you for the love. All right, guys, we're going to go back to the content in just a second. MNL Odell says it's disrespectful to try to shame someone into staying in a religious service. Yes, it is. And I was very, very, very dissatisfied with that. That's why I sat there calmly, you know, but I was thinking in the back of my mind, I will never step foot in this place ever again. You know, if this is the dynamic that you are fostering, I don't want to be a part of it. No. Okay. Bear with me, guys. Bear with me as I go along. Sunflower says, Son of Sunflower says, some people can wait over a year before the abuse shows up. A year, 2 years, 3 years. And get this, I once counseled a family where the husband didn't start showing his abusive tendencies until 20 years after they got married. And I remember having that family thinking, okay, this is not good for my hope in marriage because how can you be married? Like, help me understand this, guys. How can you be married for 20 long years and you don't know that your husband is abusive? It is the most terrifying thing, right? And so this family, struggled with this because they were a very close knit family. They knew everything about each other. You know, they had 10 kids, some adopted, some birthed. And you would look at them on the, excuse me, on the outside, and you would see a beautiful family. But underneath the surface, there had been abuse. And it only happened after 20 years of marriage. It's awful, right? Susan Smith, hello. Glad to see you back tonight. Excuse me, guys. Okay, let me find 2 or 3 more comments. Bossy Truthy 15, hello. Glad to see you back. The craziest things come out of my mouth sometimes, Jermaine. Just ignore me. My family, so my mom and my brothers, they just laugh at me all the time. They're like, you should have been a comedian. Raymond Vincent Garcia. Yes, you're welcome. I didn't even know I answered it. Did I answer it? Good. That's wonderful. Guys, do I look, I don't want to mess up the scene here. Do I look like my camera's out of focus? Yeah, it was out of focus. See, I could see that out of the corner of my eye. Hopefully that's better for you guys. All right, let me welcome this person, Explore Regina. Oh God, Sakatachwan. I'm sorry. You're going to have to pronounce that for me somehow. Hello and welcome. Good to see you and welcome to the channel. Explore Regina Sakachat. I'm messing that up. I'm just going to say Explore Regina. Okay. Hi, Miss Tamara. I'm new to your channel, but my mom is my #1 abuser. Ugh. First of all, welcome to the channel. Glad that you're here. And hopefully you have heard some things tonight that just kind of clarify some things for you. And I'm sorry that your mom is your #1 abuser. Who wants to digest that kind of truth, right? It's very, very painful to digest that. But I welcome you. I'm glad you're here. Okay. One last person. Ooh, this is hard. Mercuria Bird. I know I messed that up. I'm just going to put you on the screen here. Hello and welcome. Good to have you in tonight's live chat and welcome to the channel. They say it makes sense. Whoops, I'm so sorry. It makes sense that people who abuse substances can abuse others. Yes, it does, right? Keep in mind that lowered inhibition, those reduced inhibitions, they don't have what it takes to just pump the brakes, you know? So what should you look for in an abuser, and what does research highlight as being a few things that are red flags? Well, when I was looking at some of the research articles, I was going through like different research studies that have been done in families, in workplaces, in romance, in neighborhood situations. The #1 sign that you may, and it's a red flag, okay, that you may be dealing with an abuser is having concrete proof that they are stalkers and trackers. Now, here's what this means. This is not just my phone beeps 900 times a night, I believe it's my stalker. Or, you know, somebody calls my phone every Tuesday and hangs up, I believe it's my stalker, right? Not that. Research says it has to be proven information. So an installed GPS on your phone, that is very trackable, right? And you can literally go to it on your phone. There's GPS apps that can be installed on your phone when you least expect it. You're asleep, you're in a different room, you left your phone somewhere, somebody got access to your phone by opening it, whatever. You can download apps that run in the background, and the GPS is not identifiable. It doesn't show up in your apps list that we have on our phones. And it runs in the background, and you could be being tracked that way. You know, if you just open up, let me open my phone here for a second. Let me look at an app. I'm going to scare you guys half to death because my younger sibling, he is studying computer science, and he's really good at understanding, you know, trackers and GPSs and kind of the, can I say, the psychology of the computer world. Well, anyway, if you open up a Walmart app. Okay. So let's say you have Walmart. Okay. if you open up your Walmart app, okay, if you look, can you guys see that a little bit? Okay, the front page of Walmart, you're going to see your name, you're going to see your location. And if you see your name, if you're signed into your account, you can look at your location and it will tell you if a spot is open for you to order for that particular day and that particular location, right? How in the world do you think, and I know you guys know this, I'm preaching to the choir here, but how do you guys think Walmart is able to know that Greensburg, right, Atlanta, Georgia, California is where you want to order? They track you. They do. If you go into the properties of the app, you will see the cookies, you will see the data, they're tracking you. So some research in psychology says that, okay, apps are there to do that. So they can kind of cater to your needs and they can kind of give you what you want and sell things to you. But there are apps that can be installed by a lover, a relationship partner, a parent, an abusive child, a son, an abusive parent. Like, for example, I had a client a couple of years ago. He installed a GPS tracker on his mother's cell phone device and even on her iPad. And wherever she would go, she was 70 years old, he knew exactly where she was because he installed these devices on her phone. And even on her iPad, and she was being tracked 24/7. So research in psychology suggests that this is often the most common red flag, is when you know that somebody has a propensity for tracking, that somebody has this propensity toward kind of gaining control and dominance in this way. I'm going to watch you. I'm going to oversee you. I'm going to hover, right? I'm going to dominate your footsteps by tracking you. So that's the number one red flag. The other thing is pressured isolation. Somebody says, you're going to have to just stay with me. I want you all to myself. I once had a client, this was maybe about 5 or 6 years ago. She would keep her children indoors all the time. She was very neurotic, very anxious, very overwhelmed by life, and she didn't want to be alone. She had this intense fear of abandonment. And what she would do is keep her children in the house with her all the time. She had a beautiful home. She showed me when she and her husband got married. She showed me their first home, which was lovely. And they decided to have 4 kids. And so she was carrying one, and then she had the 3. And, she would say to me, we could go outside and play at the playground. We could go in the backyard and do all kinds of things. She says, but I just don't want to do anything. I just want to keep my kids to myself. I feel like if I let my kids go too far, or if I let my children go outside, or if I go outside with them, I'm sharing them with the world. And she confessed to me, I'm isolating them. And that was a Child Protective Services call, because she cannot isolate them based on her own emotional and psychological needs. So pressured isolation is something that can happen. And it is often another red flag. Another red flag is religious abuse. We talked about that, so I'm not going to get into that. But that is one. Selfishness and narcissism. We kind of talked about that. That's another red flag. Taking and keeping incriminating information. I've seen some clients who are on the narcissistic spectrum, and they will take photos with their friends, with their spouse, with their extended family, and they will keep the unattractive photos. They will keep the photos where the person was caught off guard. And if we're talking about a romance or some kind of dating relationship, sometimes photos that were taken between the two are also shared, right? So it's keeping incriminating evidence. That should not be happening, right? So that's another red flag, that an individual has the propensity to abuse. These are all, and I'm going to continue on, but I just want to say this. These are all things that research in psychology around abusive individuals has found to be some of the red flags. It says that their ability to manage relationships is compromised because they don't have emotional intelligence, which is often what allows them to do these things: track you, isolate you, abuse you religiously, financially, economically, right? Keep incriminating information. Digital abuse, right? So going online and posting things about you online, maybe sharing things. I once had a client who She was breaking up with her boyfriend of 2 years because she caught him having an affair with someone. I don't blame her. I was happy for her. I said, leave him alone. He's not ready. He's not ready at all. And she says to me, she says, can you believe he posted my driver's license number, my social security number, and my date of birth online? And he posted it on Facebook. He posted it on Instagram. He went to her My Story page or website or whatever and posted it on there. And I told her it's almost like digital abuse. But these are also legal offenses. So go ahead and press some charges because he shouldn't be doing that, But keep in mind that these kind of individuals, they have an inability to be stable. And so these are signs of individuals who are very emotionally unintelligent. They don't know how to be equal. They don't know how to respect boundaries. They don't know how to have guilt, shame, right? So these are things that they do. Deleting, deleted content. I'm going to put it that way. Deleted content. That's another form of abuse. I'm just going to delete all these photos because I don't want you to have them. I've had clients who have done that too in the past. They break up with someone and what do? They go into that other person's phone and they just start deleting everything. That can be very dominating and controlling. And it can be part of the digital abuse, A cycle of abuse can happen with your family, with your spouse, with your friends, even your neighbors, where, there's a tension building stage, where there's some aggravation and frustration between you guys. It starts to get a little bit heated, right? There's an explosion, and then we're back to being okay again. And that is that repetitive cycle of abuse. I'll post it in the description box later on, but that can happen in any setting, right? Family, romance, friends, coworkers, the list goes on. Extreme mood swings. That's another sign the research has highlighted. Abusive individuals have lack of control. And so mood swings that are extreme is often at the core of an abusive individual. I'm going to say codependency. That's also a thing. You're not codependent on them. They're codependent on you, right? They're kind of looking at you as a separate identity of theirs, I've seen parent-child dynamics like that, where the parent just stays so interconnected to the child that the adult child can't even go be free, can't go off to college, can't work where they want to work, can't even get married, can't even date, because mom or dad is so emotionally connected, and it's very, very, very unhealthy. These are interesting red flags, right, guys? There are more, but these are main ones that you should be looking for. You can find them in your family anywhere, right? Again, keep in mind that red flags are just highlighting that these are individuals who are very emotionally unintelligent. They are unhealthy, and they don't have the neurological healthiness, if you will, to perform in ways that they should within their relationships. And so you're dealing with a person who is really, in a sense, kind of handicapped, if you will, for lack of a clinical term, because they, it's like they're missing their right arm or they're missing their left leg because they're not moving forward in the relationship in a way that's healthy. They often go off and veer off into a place where there is nothing but confusion, nothing but frustration, nothing but deception, nothing but heartache, right? And so we can go on talking about this for days, but hopefully this live chat was helpful to you and insightful. Let's pause here, guys. I'm going to go ahead and go back to the chat box, see what you guys are saying, and say goodnight to you. For next week, I probably will post a video on Monday, and then I'm going to be quiet for the rest of the week. I'll see you again on Friday and Saturday, but I do want to spend my birthday week next week just kind of resting and recuperating. So you're going to see a video. I'm going to be there. I'm going to be quiet for the rest of the week, and then I'll be back on Friday and Saturday with a live chat. All right, guys, let me just kind of look at some of this, and we will go ahead and wrap up. The Good Glow says they seem to have such a suspicious nature about them. Yes, they do. Yeah. Sometimes abusers do have that nature, right? And that is why their abusive tendencies aren't often looked at. because they seem to be one way when they really aren't. You know what I mean? And even though they might have an edge of suspiciousness, it's hard to say, is that suspiciousness or is that an autism spectrum disorder? Is that suspiciousness or is that a quiet, introverted person, you know? So sometimes it's really hard to tell. Excuse me. Annie Walker says, "Oh my God, you owe me." Yes, yeah, that's their attitude. Jeremy Robinson says, "My mom is like this." AMB says, "This video is so helpful. Thank you so much." You're welcome, AMB, and I'm always glad to see you. Did I say hello to you, Bossy 215? I think I did. Daryl Harris, hello and welcome. Glad to have you tonight. Good to see you. Okay. Uh-oh. Hit the wrong button. Not tonight, YouTube. G, hello. Welcome to the channel and glad to see you tonight. Yes, this is terrible. I will just use that and apply it to the whole conversation because it is. Okay. Gary Bennett says, narcissists with money are dangerous. They can buy people or threaten them so they can stay out of prison and continue selling drugs, destroying communities. Well, I don't disagree. I don't disagree. Yeah, I don't disagree, Gary Bennett. I agree with that. Give it a think. Have I said hello to you tonight? Give it a think. Hello and welcome. Good to see you tonight. Give it a think says, my sister is dark triad. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Have you experienced that dark triad in real time? I have. Years ago when I was in a community mental health center, there would be people off the street just coming in wanting a therapy session, serving just that inner community kind of a thing. And I remember seeing the sadistic side of my client. I was a therapist seeing individuals, but I was also leading group therapy. And so in group therapy, there was this really creepy guy, and he did have schizophrenia. So I kind of thought it was, was the diagnosis of schizophrenia. But I think he also had a personality disorder mixed in there somewhere. And so it was kind of scary, guys. I have to be honest with you. It was scary because he would be very sadistic and talk about crime and murder and blood and decapitation, and the list goes on in group therapy, which I thought was very attention seeking. But he would talk about that and then guess what? Switch up and be really kind and smooth and considerate, right? And that was the psychopathy. He had a strategy and his personality was very strategic. He knew that yesterday he blew it by talking about decapitation and blood, and the list goes on. So he would come back the next hour, the next day, and he would be very suave and smooth and kind to everyone. Let me get your chair for you, flirting with the women in the group. That was the psychopathy. But then he was also very narcissistic because he thought he was attractive and he thought all you had to do was look good and everybody would just bow at his feet. You know what I mean? So it's interesting how dark triad traits can really show up in one particular personality. Some people say, I don't believe it exists. I'm a believer. I think a person can embody quite a few things, but, I think a person can embody sadistic traits, Machiavellianism, psychopathy, and narcissism all in the same body, Layla Papa, I hope I'm saying that correctly. Hello, my friend. I haven't seen you in forever. Good to see you. I think is it Lala Papa? I hope I'm saying that correctly. Says, hello, Tamara. Can we speak about the Papoose and Remy Ma drama? Because this stream sounds like it fits well with tonight's topic. Oh, I don't know what that's about. I'm going to have to do some research. I'm going to be humble and say I have absolutely no idea. I'm going to have to Google that and see what you mean. Yeah. Yeah. And I'll let you know what I think about it once I do my research on it, because I'm not sure. Yes, thank you, Lala Papa. I was trying to say desensitized. Thank you for that. Thank you. Sometimes it's right on the tip of my tongue, but I can't say it. Cara B, hello, Cara B. Good to see you and welcome to tonight's live chat. Thank you very much for your prayers. We appreciate that. I appreciate that. Regina Meyer says, I have a brother with dark triad. Yep. Yeah. It's horrible when it's a family member, right? Cara B says, I'm praying for all born into emotionally unusual yet normal presenting situations. That's eloquently stated. Thank you for saying that. I like that a lot. Oh, okay, Jermaine. Jermaine says, nope, Tam. She absolutely did it fraudulently, paid nothing for him. I looked it up. Oh, then you better get her on tax fraud. I hate to say it. I hate to say it. I know his family. I don't know. You decide. You see what's worth doing. But I encourage you to get maybe get the IRS involved. Kind of figure out what your options are there. I'm sorry that happened to you, Jermaine. Ellie Wynn, yes, they are very smart kids. They can read you a mile away. Tim and Miranda. Hello, Tim and Miranda. Good to see you tonight. Welcome back. Tim and Miranda, says, how do you deal with an abuser who doesn't think he's being abusive? Well, firm boundaries. Finally, when you realize that they're abusive, firm boundaries, right? Expect nothing other than abusive behavior from them. Okay, once you see a pattern, it's a pattern for a reason, you know? The other piece of the puzzle is very intricate and it's complex, and it really warrants another full-blown conversation, you know? But I think sometimes you may have to do a little bit of a dual action here. You may have to walk on eggshells for a little bit just to keep the peace, right? So if you see them get ready to explode or do something angrily, or they're threatening you, you may have to tiptoe, right, to calm them down. Placate a little bit. You may have to do that, right? Then set a firm boundary and stick with that firm boundary. And other times you don't want to show your full hand to them either. You don't want to give them any meat to hit you back with or to use against you. You know what I mean? But this is worth of another live chat. That was a great question. James Mitchell, thank you so much for the super chat tonight. I really appreciate you for that. And welcome back to the live chat tonight. James Mitchell says, I'm 60. I need your help. At 84, my mom has been a chain smoker and alcoholic for over 55 years. We barely get along. She has been angry, bitter, and argumentative to me my whole life. I do none of that stuff. Oh, I understand. Alcoholism says addiction, right? So she's an alcoholic. Chain smoker, obviously there is some neuroticism or anxiety or something, right? Most smokers tend to kind of have this like underlying anxiety or neuroticism. The other piece of the puzzle, James Mitchell, is she's 84. You may want to do some research on dementia. You may want to do some research on potential Alzheimer's disease, because there's a clinical relationship between dementia and Alzheimer's disease and alcoholism. There's also a connection between being a chain smoker and schizophrenia. So, you know, it's like there's a variety of ways that you could look at that. And you may also want to look into, what does senility actually mean? What is that thing that we call senile, right? And has she kind of crossed that boundary or crossed that threshold at 84 where she's in reality, but the way that she behaves has kind of amped itself up over the years? Yes, she's always been like this my whole life, but it's kind of amped up now that she's older. So there's a variety of ways that you can kind of deal with a mother like this. You know, I'm so sorry. It's painful. It's difficult. You know, me just being with my own mom who recently had a stroke. My mom is young. You know, she's 2 years younger than 70. She's still young, and having a left hemispheric stroke in February of this year changed her, and I'm grieving pieces of that change, and I'm learning pieces of that change. She's still my wonderful mom, and she's doing so much better. Thank you for all the prayer, guys. But at the same time, have I seen some things in her where I'm like, we're probably going to have some need in the future for cognitive therapy. You know what I mean? And I don't mean cognitive behavior therapy for psychotherapy. I mean therapy around dementia and just forgetfulness and things like that. So I share your pain. I understand that to a certain extent. But yeah, I would do some research in those areas, see what you come up with. You may be shocked at what you find. All right, guys, one last comment. And I am going to shut the entire chat down because we'll be here till 10 p.m. Eastern time. Okay. Give me 1 second. I'm trying to find a good one. Sorara, I haven't seen you in a while. Hello and welcome. Good to see you. Hello to you and welcome tonight. Says thank you for this topic. A big part of abuse is brainwashing. You're welcome. And I agree 100%. If you feel like you've been brainwashed by an abusive parent, an abusive partner, the best way to get out from under that brainwashing is to get up under people that you trust who has some connection to reality that can tell you there's been a shift in your behavior, a shift in your personality, that can tell you something's off about you, right? And also slowly unwiring yourself from the clutches. Is that what I'm looking for? Is that the word I'm looking for? The clutch, the clench, the clutch? I think it's the clutch of the abusive person. All right, guys, I'm going to stop talking. Thank you for being with me tonight in this live chat. I truly hope it was helpful. Thank you for the super chats and all the kindness. I see you guys still chatting it away over here. I don't know how this new feature worked out. I can't see a thing. Can you guys see it? I can't see a thing. I just see a bunch of words. I feel like I'm about 90 because they all look too small for me to read. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. But thank you for being with me tonight. I hope you guys have a safe Sunday, Monday, if you're off for Memorial Day. And I'll try to do a video on Monday and I'll see you Friday and Saturday. All right, guys. Love you so much. Bye-bye.